If a vegan diet worked for mixed martial artists, everybody would be following it, but they don't. What's up, guys? Mike Dolce, four-time World MMA Trainer of the Year here, talking MMA, specifically former UFC featherweight reigning world champion Jose Aldo. Aldo was the man. He was riding a 6-year win streak, the most dominant featherweight in UFC history and possibly the most dominant featherweight in MMA history. Eventually, he lost that title on a 14-second knockout to Conor McGregor, which really catapulted Conor McGregor's career. Conor McGregor actually earned his fame and fortune off of that victory over Jose Aldo because it was such an enormous feat. Well, that being said, Aldo has now decided to drop down to 135 pounds and face former highly ranked bantamweight, right, 135 bantamweight competitor, Marlon Morais. Marlon Morais, I believe, was the World Series of Fighting 135-pound champion. If they held the title in that division, he was definitely at the very top of that division. I could pop over the laptop right now and go through the records. I don't think that's really necessary because Marlon Morais has been a perennial top 1, top 2 inside the 135-pound division. Now, this fight's interesting for 2 reasons. The first reason is because Aldo's dropping down off of a losing streak. Aldo has lost 4 out of his last 7 fights, and he most recently lost his most recent fight at 145 pounds to Alexander Volkanovski. Now, Volkanovski is scheduled to fight Max Holloway for the title. There's, no disrespect in losing to Alexander, but at the same time, Aldo has lost 4 out of his last 7 fights at 145 and has now dropped down to 135 to fight Marlon Morais, who's also coming off a loss of his own, but at the same time, I don't think it's equitable when we look at the career arc over the last 2 or 3 years. But most notably now is Aldo's dropping down to 135 after struggling for years to make 145. And very famously, he just did a media scrum prior to this event, I believe on December 14th in Las Vegas, where he will be fighting. And he had said that he is following a 2-pound of salad per day diet. And a lot of people has asked, Dolce, what do you think about this? Dolce, you're the most respected authority in weight cutting in the world of mixed martial arts. What do you think about Jose Aldo eating 2 pounds of salad per day every single day? And he said, he hasn't come out and said he's 100% vegan, but he has inferred that he's vegan because he had a history of going to a steakhouse and eating a big old steak prior to entering his weight cut. And there's some good science behind that, and I can talk about that in a different video. We call it a protein load, but it's not all about the protein. There's something deeper to that, but I'll get into that in a different video. Now, that was part of his tradition. He would have that big steak, and one of the reporters said, hey, are you going to do the big steak before your weight cut this time? And Aldo said, absolutely not, unless it's at a vegan restaurant. I cannot eat steak. I cannot eat meat. I've been following a very specialized diet in which I'm eating 2 pounds of salad per day. And the videos and photos of Aldo right now, he looks lean. He looks light. Aldo looks right now exactly like he looks when he's cutting weight for 145. The problem is, as of today, December 5th, 9 days before competition, 8 days before weigh-ins, Aldo looks exactly the way Aldo looks when he's fighting at 145. What does that mean? That means he weighs 152 today. He looks exactly today the way he looks at 152 during fight week of his 145-pound fights. Will Aldo be able to make that cut all the way down? I mean, he's got 17 more pounds, 16 pounds, because it'll be a 136 fight. He's got 16 more pounds to lose in 9 days, and I honestly don't think it's going to happen. Now, Aldo's tough, And I'm not going to say he's going to miss weight, because these crafty veterans will put their lives on the line to make weight. But I will say this will likely be a horrific weight cut, a la TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo. We all saw what happened to Dillashaw when Dillashaw tried to drop from being a dominant 135-pounder down to 125. Dillashaw got knocked out by a glancing blow from a much smaller man who is not known for knockout power. Dillashaw got dinked off the side of the head and just was out, just crushed. That was most likely due to his poor weight cut. I say Aldo is likely in this very precarious position. He said he's been dieting for 2 months. Dieting for 2 months is not nearly enough time for and Aldo's a lean guy. Aldo's never fat, right? So for a very lean 145-pounder to drop down to the 135-pound category, that 10 pounds of tissue, of lean muscle tissue, is where this weight loss is going to come from. Aldo would have had to shed that 10 pounds of lean muscle tissue, and I don't think he was able to successfully do that. What I think is Aldo has likely been following a very heavily influenced plant-based diet, and by doing that, he is likely getting a much lower total carbohydrate intake. Why is that, Dolce? Because plants have carbs, potatoes, and rice. He's staying away from that. He said he's following a salad diet. He's eating salads. Right? So very low total calories, most likely in 2 pounds of salad. It's a lot of bulk matter, so you kind of feel full, but it's not providing nearly the macronutrition that is necessary to compete at this world-class level. And depending on the variety of ingredients, he might be able to hit his macros. But the macros without macros is just as bad as the macros without micros. And that's what I'll push over towards the more carnivoric ketogenic community. They hit most of their higher end protein and fat macros, but they don't come close to getting all of their micros. This is also a deficiency diet that Aldo is following, and it's not a very good diet for mixed martial artists, combat athletes, because there is simply not enough nutrition in order to compete in such a combat-oriented sport. Too much damage being incurred, and actually a low supply of energy substrates to perform at peak conditions within the confines of a mixed martial arts competition. It's just the fact of it. It's the way it works. There are, as I know, as far as I know, and I pretty much know everybody, and I know everything, there are zero world-class vegans competing in mixed martial arts right now. Zero. There are zero world-class top 10, and world-class is top 10, right? Top 10, and top 10 stretching it. There are zero in every organization, in the UFC, in Bellator, in the PFL, in ONE FC. There are zero vegans. Zero. Again, once again, zero. Channeling my inner Greg Doucette, zero. There are zero. Why is that? Is that because the diet works? No, of course, if the diet works, everybody would be doing it. Remember, these athletes will eat dirt. They will eat turds in order to gain an advantage and win. If a vegan diet worked for mixed martial artists, everybody would be following it, but they don't. So Aldo, because he's so tough, and this is no disrespect to Aldo, because Jose Aldo is so tough, he is struggling and suffering and killing himself in order to make this weight, to make history. Now, that's commendable to a degree, but it's also very dangerous and not something that I would suggest. So I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about Jose Aldo right now. I'm very concerned about what he's up against. I would rather see him move up to 155 than drop down to 135. So this is going to be a very interesting situation. Fingers crossed he stays healthy. Fingers crossed he makes weight. Fingers crossed he goes out there and performs to his capacity. Even if he does make weight, let's look at what happened to Tiago Alvis. When Tiago Alvis dropped from 170 to 155 to fight Jim Miller blew Tiago away. Tiago couldn't even stand up in the octagon. Tiago couldn't even compete, and Tiago is a high-level athlete. Jim Miller blew Tiago away. That fight should have been more competitive. I'm not saying Tiago should have won that fight, even on their best days, but blew him away, and Tiago missed weight by 6 pounds. Tiago weighed in at 161 and change for a 155-pound fight simply because he thought he'd be able to make the weight, and he could not. Jose Aldo, I think, is falling into a very similar situation. He thinks it'll be easy, but that 10 pounds is brutal. When you're cutting weight, the last 3 pounds are harder than the first 30. And any athlete who's ever cut weight knows that the last 3 pounds are harder than the first 30 pounds to lose. And that's the truth. So I hope Aldo well. I hope Morais well. You know, I love this fight. I love this matchup. But I do not want to see Jose jumping down to 135. I think it's very dangerous. And that's my take on it. I appreciate you guys. Leave your comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. And until next time, boom!